Cambridge, England, autumn of 1934. The ancient stones of Trinity College absorb the whispers of brilliant young men who gather in shadowed corners, their conversations hidden beneath layers of academic discourse. Among them walks a recruiter, a man who does not carry a gun or badge, but something far more dangerous, an ideology that promises to reshape the world. His name is Arnold Deutsch, controller for the NKVD, and he is hunting for the perfect traitors. What follows is not fiction. Every name, every date, every betrayal documented in these pages occurred exactly as described. 5 men, educated at Britain's most prestigious university, will sell their nation's deepest secrets to the Soviet Union for more than 3 decades. They will send agents to their deaths. They will compromise atomic weapons research. They will betray every oath they swore. The horror is not in supernatural shadows or invented monsters. The horror is in the truth that the men sworn to protect Britain were the very ones destroying it from within. This is the story of the Cambridge Five. Be sure to subscribe to our channel. There's a lot of interesting stuff ahead. The Recruiter. Winter 1933. Arnold Deutsch steps off the train at Cambridge Station, his Austrian accent masked by careful English pronunciation. He is 33 years old, a doctor of philosophy, and a dedicated communist intelligence officer. His mission? Identify brilliant young men disillusioned with capitalism, men who might betray their country for an idea. Deutsch moves through Cambridge's socialist societies like a ghost. The Cambridge University Socialist Society, the Anti-War Council, the student communist groups, all provide fertile hunting grounds. He is looking for specific traits: intelligence, access to power, moral flexibility, dressed as ideological conviction. We seek those who understand that the old world must die, Deutsch tells his handlers in coded messages to Moscow Center. Cambridge provides them in abundance. The economic depression grips Britain. Unemployment reaches 3 million. Fascism rises in Germany. Young intellectuals at Cambridge debate revolution over sherry in wood-paneled rooms. Most will forget these conversations after graduation. 5 will not. By December of 1933, Deutsch has identified his first target, Harold Adrian Russell Philby, known to everyone as Kim. 21 years old, charismatic, son of the famous explorer St. John Philby. Kim Philby has just graduated from Trinity College with a degree in economics. More importantly, he has spent the past year openly supporting communist causes. The First Betrayal. Vienna, February 1934. Kim Philby arrives in the Austrian capital supposedly to improve his German and observe European politics. In reality, Arnold Deutsch has arranged everything. The city trembles on the edge of civil war between socialists and fascists. The shooting starts at dawn, whispers Litzi Friedman, an Austrian communist who will become Philby's first wife. The Dollfuss government moves to crush the socialist uprising. Philby witnesses the violence firsthand, artillery shells destroying workers' housing, summary executions in the streets. On the 10th of February, as Austrian security forces hunt communists, Philby marries Litzi in a hasty ceremony. The marriage serves 2 purposes. It allows Litzi to escape Austria with a British passport, and it binds Philby closer to the communist cause. 3 days later, Arnold Deutsch makes his approach. They meet in a cafe near the Ringstrasse, surrounded by the aftermath of failed revolution. Deutsch speaks softly, but with absolute conviction. You can serve the cause more effectively than carrying a rifle, Deutsch tells Philby. Britain will face the fascist threat. We need men in positions of power who understand the true enemy. Will you work for peace For the Soviet Union? Philby's answer comes without hesitation. Yes. In that single word, uttered in a Viennese cafe while police sirens wail outside, Britain's most damaging intelligence failure begins. Philby will betray his country for the next 29 years. The Second Recruit. Cambridge, spring of 1934. Donald Duart McLean walks through Trinity Hall's courtyard, his tall frame slightly hunched as always. 21 years old, son of a liberal cabinet minister, he graduated top of his class in modern languages. He speaks French fluently, reads German, and possesses a photographic memory for documents. Arnold Deutsch has been watching McLean for months. The young man's father, Sir Donald McLean, died the previous June, leaving Donald Jr. adrift and questioning everything his father represented. Grief mixed with ideological awakening creates the perfect psychological vulnerability. The approach comes through a trusted intermediary, James Klugman, an open communist at Cambridge who has Deutsch's confidence. Klugman invites McLean to a discussion group that meets in Trinity College rooms rented under a false name. "The Foreign Office will accept you," Klugman tells McLean over wine one evening in June. "Your father's name guarantees it. But what will you do with that access? Serve a dying empire or help build the future?" McLean meets Deutsch in London in July of 1934. The conversation lasts 3 hours. Deutsch explains that McLean can serve the cause of peace by providing information about British foreign policy to the Soviet Union. No military secrets, Deutsch assures him, just diplomatic intelligence that will help prevent another war. McLean agrees. He takes the Foreign Office examination in August and passes with distinction. By October, he begins his training at the Foreign Office. By December, he is photographing documents for the NKVD. The second betrayer is in place. The Aristocrat. London, autumn of 1935. Guy Francis de Moncey Burgess lounges in his Mayfair flat, chain-smoking and drinking whiskey, though it is barely noon. 24 years old, he has recently returned from Cambridge with a history degree and a reputation for brilliant conversation mixed with scandalous behavior. Burgess is everything Philby and McLean are not. Openly homosexual in an era when it is illegal, flamboyantly drunk, deliberately provocative. Yet beneath the chaotic exterior lies a sharp intelligence and an ability to charm secrets from anyone. Arnold Deutsch recognizes him as a natural intelligence agent, though a dangerous one. The recruitment happens in stages. First, through social connections at Cambridge, then through a job offer at the BBC, where Burgess begins producing talks programs. The BBC provides perfect cover. He travels, meets politicians and diplomats, and no one questions why he takes such detailed notes. In January of 1936, Burgess meets Deutsch at a safe house in Bayswater. Unlike the careful recruitment of Philby and McLean, Burgess's agreement comes quickly. He enjoys the deception, the danger, the sense of being part of something larger than his dissolute life. "I can get information from anyone," Burgess boasts to Deutsch. "They think I'm too drunk to remember, too frivolous to matter. They're wrong." Deutsch reports to Moscow. The Englishman is unreliable in his personal habits but exceptional in his work. He will provide access to the highest levels of government. Within months, Burgess begins recruiting his own subagents, building a network that will eventually reach into Downing Street itself. The Art Historian. Cambridge, spring of 1937. Anthony Frederick Blunt stands before a lecture hall filled with students, discussing the Baroque architecture of Rome. 30 years old, a fellow of Trinity College, he is already recognized as one of Britain's most promising art historians. Blunt's rooms at Trinity overlook the Great Court. Here, in carefully orchestrated encounters, he meets with Arnold Deutsch. The recruitment is complex because Blunt is sophisticated, cautious, and already successful. He does not need ideology to fill an emotional void like the younger recruits. What Deutsch offers Blunt is influence. Not money, not ideology alone, but the chance to shape history from the shadows. Blunt, like many intellectuals of his generation, believes the Soviet Union represents humanity's best hope against fascism. But unlike the others, he approaches betrayal with cold calculation rather than passionate conviction. The moment of commitment comes in June of 1937. War looms on the horizon. Germany remilitarizes. Spain descends into civil war. Blunt makes his decision. He will spy for the Soviet Union. "I can provide something none of the others can," Blunt tells Deutsch during their final recruitment meeting. "Access to the royal family. Through my work with the royal collection, I will enter Buckingham Palace itself." Deutsch immediately recognizes the value. Blunt can observe the monarchy's true political influence, identify security vulnerabilities, and recruit other agents from aristocratic circles. In September of 1938, when war seems imminent, Blunt joins MI5, Britain's domestic intelligence service. The fox is inside the henhouse. The Mathematician. Cambridge, late 1937. John Cairncross sits in the Trinity College library, surrounded by mathematics texts. 24 years old, son of a Scottish ironmonger, he won a scholarship to Cambridge and excelled in languages. He speaks French, German, Italian, and Russian. His brilliance is undeniable, but so is his resentment of the British class system that treats him as an outsider. James Klugman, who recruited Maclean, identifies Cairncross as perfect material. Intelligent, idealistic, angry at the establishment. Arnold Deutsch needs no convincing. Cairncross passes the Foreign Office examination in 1936 and enters the Treasury. By 1937, he is photographing documents for Soviet intelligence. The recruitment meeting happens in a rented flat near King's Cross Station. Deutsch is direct. Britain and France will appease Hitler. Millions will die because of this cowardice. You can help prevent it by sharing information with the only power willing to fight fascism. Cairncross agrees immediately. Unlike Philby's ideological conviction or Blunt's calculated ambition, Cairncross's motivation is simpler: revenge against a system that patronized him. He will prove he is smarter than all of them by betraying them all. In 1938, Cairncross transfers to the Foreign Office proper, working directly under Lord Halifax, the Foreign Secretary. He has access to the most sensitive diplomatic communications in the British government. All of it flows to Moscow. The five are now in place. The Cambridge spy ring is complete. The Gathering Storm. London, September of 1938. Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain returns from Munich waving a paper that promises peace for our time. Britain has betrayed Czechoslovakia to appease Hitler. Donald Maclean, working in the Foreign Office's Western Department, has already sent Moscow every detail of the negotiations. The Cambridge Five function as a coordinated network now. Philby, working as a journalist covering the Spanish Civil War, reports on British intelligence operations supporting Franco. Burgess, at the BBC, cultivates sources in the Conservative government. Blunt prepares to enter MI5. Cairncross photographs Treasury documents about British rearmament spending. Their controller, Arnold Deutsch, operates from a cover business in London. Dead drops are established across the city. Regent's Park, Kew Gardens, the British Museum. Each spy uses multiple code names. Philby is Sonchen, sunny. McLean is Wace, orphan. Burgess is Hicks. Blunt is Yan. And Cairncross is List. The intelligence they provide is catastrophic for British security. Moscow knows Britain's military weaknesses, diplomatic strategies, intelligence capabilities. When Britain finally declares war on Germany in September of 1939, Stalin already knows Britain is unprepared. Then comes a shock that tests every spy's loyalty: the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact. On the 23rd of August 1939, the Soviet Union signs a non-aggression treaty with Nazi Germany. The two totalitarian powers agree to divide Poland between them. "How can we justify this?" Cairncross asks his handler in a panicked meeting. "We're supposed to be fighting fascism." The handler's response is cold. "You serve the Soviet Union. The party decides what is necessary for the revolution. Do you continue, or do you betray us to British intelligence?" All five continue. They are in too deep now to turn back. War and Betrayal. London, September of 1939 to June of 1941. Britain stands alone against Hitler after the fall of France. The Blitz reduces parts of London to rubble. Children are evacuated. Men join the military. The Cambridge Five continue their work in comfort and safety, their betrayals hidden behind patriotic service. Anthony Blunt joins MI5 in June of 1940. His position: officer in B Division, responsible for monitoring foreign intelligence services operating in Britain. He has access to every major counterintelligence operation. The first thing he does is warn Moscow about British agents operating in Soviet territory. Those agents will be arrested and executed. How many did he compromise? A former MI5 officer will later testify. Dozens at least, perhaps hundreds. We'll never know the full count because Soviet archives remain closed. But every time we tried to run an operation in their sphere, they knew we were coming. Kim Philby joins the Secret Intelligence Service, MI6, in July of 1940. His father's connections and his journalism experience make him valuable. He starts in Section D, responsible for sabotage and black propaganda. Soon, he will climb higher. Guy Burgess worms his way into MI6 through connections and charm. Donald MacLean becomes First Secretary at the British Embassy in Washington. John Cairncross transfers to Bletchley Park, the top-secret facility where British cryptographers break German codes. On the 22nd of June 1941, Germany invades the Soviet Union. Operation Barbarossa. The Nazi-Soviet alliance shatters. Now Britain and the Soviet Union are allies. The Cambridge Five exhale in relief. They no longer have to reconcile serving both a communist state and fighting Hitler. But their betrayals only intensify. Now they justify their treason as helping an ally. The truth is darker. They are ensuring the Soviet Union survives the war strong enough to dominate Eastern Europe afterward. Bletchley Park, Buckinghamshire, autumn of 1942. John Cairncross walks through Hut 3, where intercepted German messages are translated and analyzed. He is unremarkable among the eccentric mathematicians and linguists. No one suspects that he copies every significant decrypt before leaving each day. The intelligence from Bletchley is some of Britain's most valuable. German military plans, U-boat positions, Luftwaffe strength assessments. British and American commanders use this information to plan operations, saving thousands of lives. Cairncross sends it all to Moscow. The most significant moment comes in July of 1943. German forces prepare for Operation Citadel, a massive offensive against the Kursk salient in the Soviet Union.
British cryptographers at Bletchley decrypt the German battle plans completely. They know the exact date, location, and force strength of the attack. British intelligence shares some of this with their Soviet allies through official channels, but Cairncross provides everything: the complete decrypts, British analysis, assessments of German capabilities. When the attack begins on the 5th of July, Soviet forces are perfectly positioned. The Battle of Kursk becomes the largest tank battle in history and a decisive Soviet victory. Did Cairncross's intelligence change the battle's outcome? Historians will later debate. Soviet sources, once opened, show they had multiple intelligence sources warning of the attack,
but none provided the comprehensive detail that Cairncross delivered. He gave them victory on a silver platter stolen from Bletchley Park. Cairncross meets his handler in London during leave periods. Dead drops in Regent's Park. Brief encounters in crowded pubs. He uses a Minox camera to photograph documents, hiding the film in cigarette packs. Once, walking through the park with hundreds of Bletchley decrypts in his briefcase, he passes a police constable. The constable nods politely. Cairncross nods back. The moment passes. Washington Secrets. Washington, D.C., May of 1944. Donald McLean arrives at the British Embassy on Massachusetts Avenue. Age 31, polished, fluent in diplomatic language. He is appointed First Secretary and becomes acting head of Chancery, controlling the flow of information between London and Washington. The posting is a disaster for Allied security. McLean has access to everything: communications between Churchill and Roosevelt, military planning, economic policy. Most dangerous of all, he has access to information about the Manhattan Project, the secret program to develop atomic weapons. In August of 1944, McLean attends meetings of the Combined Policy Committee, which coordinates Anglo-American atomic research. He learns the scale of the project, the location of production facilities, estimates of when the bomb will be ready. All of this intelligence goes to Moscow. McLean's Soviet handler in New York is Anatoly Gorsky, operating under the code name Vadim. They meet in safe houses, museums, parks. McLean photographs documents using a Leica camera. Sometimes he simply writes summaries from memory, his photographic recall capturing exact wording of classified cables. We know from Soviet archives that Homer's information was crucial. A CIA analyst will later testify, using McLean's codename. The atomic intelligence alone accelerated their program by at least 2 years, but he also provided political intelligence that shaped Stalin's post-war strategy. While McLean betrays atomic secrets in Washington, another spy does the same at Los Alamos: Klaus Fuchs, a German-born physicist working on the bomb's design. Fuchs and McLean never meet, but their intelligence streams converge in Moscow. The Soviet atomic bomb project, which Western intelligence believes is years away from success, is actually approaching completion. On the 6th of August, 1945, America drops an atomic bomb on Hiroshima. 3 days later, Nagasaki. Japan surrenders. The war ends, the nuclear age begins, and the Soviet Union, thanks to spies like McLean and Fuchs, is only 4 years behind. The Cold War begins. London, spring of 1946. Victory celebrations have ended. Britain is exhausted, broke, and facing the reality that it won the war but lost its empire. The Soviet Union tightens its grip on Eastern Europe. Winston Churchill, speaking in Fulton, Missouri, warns that an iron curtain has descended across the continent. The Cambridge Five adapt to the new reality. They are no longer helping an ally, but betraying their country to a hostile power. None of them flinch. Their commitment to Soviet communism overrides any loyalty to Britain. Kim Philby rises to become head of Section 9 in MI6, responsible for anti-Soviet operations. He is perfectly positioned to sabotage every British and American intelligence operation against Moscow. When MI6 plans to infiltrate agents into Soviet-controlled territory, Philby warns Moscow. Those agents disappear. We would parachute men into Albania, into Ukraine, into the Baltic states, a former MI6 officer will recall. They would last days or weeks before being captured. We never understood why every operation failed. Now we know. Philby told them we were coming. Anthony Blunt continues in MI5 until 1945, when he resigns to pursue his art history career full-time. But he maintains contact with Soviet intelligence, providing information about MI5's counterintelligence methods and passing messages between the other spies. Guy Burgess causes growing concern among his MI6 colleagues. His drinking worsens. He becomes belligerent, taking risks. In 1948, after a drunk driving incident, MI6 quietly pushes him out. But Burgess has connections. He joins the Foreign Office Information Research Department and continues providing intelligence to Moscow. The first crack in the ring appears in 1945. Soviet cipher clerk Igor Guzenko defects in Ottawa, bringing documents that hint at Soviet spy networks in the West. British intelligence begins a massive investigation. But the defector's information is fragmentary. The Cambridge Five remain hidden. Venona, Arlington, Virginia, early 1947. In a nondescript building, American cryptographers work on a project so secret that even most senior officials do not know of its existence. The Venona Project, an attempt to decrypt Soviet intelligence communications from the war years. The cryptographers make a breakthrough. A Soviet code clerk in the early 1940s had reused one-time pads, making certain messages vulnerable to decryption. The Americans can now read fragments of Soviet intelligence traffic from 1940 to 1945. What they find is terrifying. The messages reference multiple Soviet spies inside the Manhattan Project, the State Department, the Treasury Department, and, most disturbing, British intelligence services. Code names appear: Homer, Hicks, Stanley, Tony, List. The NSA cryptographers have no idea who these spies are, only that they existed and sent enormous amounts of classified information to Moscow. In July of 1947, the CIA station chief in London, Robert Lamphere, travels to meet with MI5 and MI6. He brings decrypted Venona transcripts. British intelligence officers read them with growing horror. One of the spies, codename Homer, was in Washington during the war, Lamphere explains. He had access to atomic secrets and high-level policy discussions. He's British, and based on these details about his assignments, he's still active somewhere in your foreign service. The MI5 officer assigned to investigate is Kim Philby. He is now liaison between British intelligence and the CIA, trusted by both services. He reads the Venona transcripts with mounting alarm. The net is closing. Homer is obviously Donald McLean. The investigation must be directed away from Cambridge 5, or all of them will fall. Philby begins a careful, delaying operation. He suggests alternative candidates for Homer. He questions the reliability of the decrypts. He emphasizes the need for more evidence before making accusations against senior diplomats. Month after month, he slows the investigation while secretly warning Moscow that British intelligence is getting close. The net closes. London, spring of 1951. The Venona investigation has spent 4 years identifying Homer. Every detail points to Donald Maclean, his posting in Washington during the war, his access to atomic intelligence, specific phrases in the decrypted messages that match his known communication style. On the 10th of April, 1951, MI5 officially identifies Maclean as the prime suspect. The evidence is circumstantial but compelling. Plans are made to interrogate him, but the investigation must proceed carefully. Maclean is now head of the American department in the Foreign Office, one of the most sensitive positions in British government. Kim Philby receives word of Maclean's identification through his position as MI6 liaison. He immediately realizes the danger. If MI5 arrests Maclean, intensive interrogation might break him. Maclean is psychologically fragile, showing signs of alcoholism and nervous strain. Under pressure, he might reveal the entire Cambridge network. Philby contacts his Soviet handler through an emergency procedure, a chalk mark on a mailbox near Sloane Square tube station. The response comes within hours. Moscow orders Maclean's immediate exfiltration to the Soviet Union. On the 20th of May, 1951, Guy Burgess returns to London from Washington. His diplomatic career is over after another drunken incident. He is angry, careless, and desperate. Philby makes a calculated decision. Use Burgess to get Maclean out, even though it means exposing Burgess as well. They're going to arrest Maclean, Philby tells Burgess during a meeting in St. James's Park. You need to get him out of the country. Moscow has arranged everything. I'll be exposed, Burgess protests. Yes, Philby says flatly. But Maclean's arrest will expose all of us. This is the only way. The flight. Friday, the 25th of May, 1951. Donald Maclean sits at his desk in the Foreign Office, reviewing cables about the Korean War. He shows no outward sign of stress, but he knows MI5 is investigating him. His Soviet handler has warned him to be ready to leave at any moment. At 6 o'clock that evening, Maclean leaves the office and takes the train to his home in Tatsfield, Surrey. His wife, Melinda, is pregnant with their third child. The house is comfortable, middle class, respectable. Maclean eats dinner with his family, plays with his children, acts normally. At 7:30, Guy Burgess arrives in a hired Austin car. He tells Melinda that he and Donald need to attend a late meeting in London. Melinda is suspicious, but says nothing. The two men drive away. They do not drive to London. Instead, they head to Southampton, 90 miles south. At the dock, they board the midnight ferry to Saint-Malo, France. The ferry captain later remembers 2 Englishmen, one well-dressed and silent, the other drunk and loud. They claimed to be businessmen taking a weekend holiday in France. The ferry arrives in Saint-Malo at 8:30 on the morning of Saturday, the 26th of May. Burgess and Maclean take a taxi to Rennes, then trains to Paris. Soviet agents meet them at different locations, guiding them through a carefully planned escape route. On Monday morning, the 28th of May, Maclean fails to appear at the Foreign Office. His secretary calls his home. Melinda has no idea where he is. By midday, MI5 realizes what has happened. The prime suspect in Britain's most serious espionage case has vanished. It takes 2 more days to discover that Guy Burgess disappeared at the same time. The connection is obvious. Burgess helped McLean defect, which means Burgess was also a Soviet spy. The investigation explodes across MI5 and MI6. The interrogation. London, June of 1951. Kim Philby sits in an MI6 interrogation room, smoking cigarettes and maintaining perfect composure. The disappearance of Burgess and McLean has triggered a security earthquake. Every intelligence officer who knew them is under suspicion. Philby is at the top of the list. The evidence against Philby is circumstantial but damning. He and Burgess lived together in Washington. He had access to the Venona investigation that identified McLean. He was in position to warn both men. MI5's lead interrogator, William Scardon, presses hard. "You understand why we must ask these questions," Scardon begins gently. "Two of your closest friends have defected to Moscow. You shared a house with Burgess. You had access to information about our investigation of McLean." Philby responds with calm indignation. "Burgess was a colleague, not a close friend. His drinking and behavior embarrassed me. I had no idea he was a Soviet agent. As for warning McLean, I had no opportunity. I learned of the identification through official channels only days before the defection." The interrogation continues for weeks. Philby never breaks. He admits nothing. His cover story holds because it is partly true. He did not like Burgess's behavior. He did not directly assist the defection. The critical fact that he warned Moscow through secret channels cannot be proven without Soviet cooperation. In July of 1951, MI6 forces Philby to resign. The official reason is administrative reorganization. The real reason is that both MI5 and the CIA no longer trust him. But they cannot prove he is a spy, so he is allowed to leave quietly with his pension. Philby retreats to his mother's flat in London, outwardly accepting his fate, inwardly planning his next move. He is unemployed, under surveillance, but still free, and still a Soviet agent. The Survivors. London, late 1951. Anthony Blunt reads newspaper reports about the Burgess and McLean defection with carefully controlled fear. He has not been questioned. His name has not appeared in the investigation. But he knows it is only a matter of time. Blunt makes a decision. He will cease all espionage activities immediately. No more meetings with Soviet handlers. No more passing of information. He will retreat into his respectable life as an art historian and hope that MI5 never connects him to the Cambridge Five. The strategy works. Blunt's position as surveyor of the Queen's pictures provides perfect cover. He is seen as a patriotic public servant, a man who served in MI5 during the war and earned the trust of the royal family. His knighthood, awarded in 1956, seems to confirm he is above suspicion. John Cairncross also escapes immediate suspicion. He left government service in 1945 and now works for the United Nations in Rome. He maintains no contact with Soviet intelligence. Like Blunt, he hopes that silence will protect him. But MI5 does not forget. A small team continues investigating the Cambridge connections. They interview everyone who knew Burgess and McLean at university. They review old records, looking for patterns. The investigation is methodical, patient, and relentless. In Moscow, Burgess and McLean live under strict Soviet control. They are valuable propaganda assets, but also potential security risks. The KGB monitors their every move. Burgess drinks himself into decline. McLean struggles with guilt and depression. Both men realize too late that they have exchanged one form of captivity for another. Philby's return. Beirut, Lebanon, September of 1956. Kim Philby sits at a cafe overlooking the Mediterranean, working as a journalist for The Observer and The Economist. 5 years after his forced resignation, he has rebuilt a life of sorts. He covers Middle Eastern politics, writes insightful analysis, and maintains a veneer of respectability. What few know is that Philby is back on the MI6 payroll, not officially employed but providing intelligence reports as a contract agent. MI6's Middle East operations need local expertise, and Philby provides it. Some in MI6 argue he was wrongly suspected. Others tolerate his employment because he is still useful. Philby also resumes contact with Soviet intelligence. His new handler meets him at intervals in Beirut's crowded streets and bazaars. The intelligence he provides is less valuable than during his government service, but still significant. MI6's operations in the Middle East, CIA activities in Lebanon, British assessments of Arab nationalism. "I am useful to them again," Philby writes to his Soviet handler in 1957. "They cannot quite let go of me, and I will not let go of the cause." The arrangement continues for 6 years. Philby thrives in Beirut's dangerous cosmopolitan atmosphere. He drinks heavily, remarries, and plays the role of a cynical journalist disillusioned with British politics. The mask is so perfect that even those who suspect him cannot prove anything. Then, in 1961, a Soviet intelligence officer named Anatoly Golitsyn defects to the CIA. Golitsyn brings with him decades of knowledge about Soviet operations. One of his first revelations? There is a Soviet spy, codenamed Stanley, who penetrated British intelligence at the highest levels and is still active. The final evidence. London, January of 1963. MI5 officer Arthur Martin studies the latest intelligence from defector Anatoly Golitsyn. The information about Stanley matches what they already suspected. Stanley is Kim Philby. But Golitsyn provides new details that make the case overwhelming. Stanley warned Moscow about Operation Valuable, the MI6 plan to infiltrate agents into Albania in 1949. All those agents were captured or killed. Stanley provided information about Anglo-American cooperation on signals intelligence. Stanley sabotaged dozens of operations over 2 decades. MI5 Chief Roger Hollis makes the decision: confront Philby directly in Beirut. An official interrogation will give Philby one chance to confess and cooperate. If he refuses, they will seek his extradition and prosecution. Nicholas Elliott, a senior MI6 officer and one of Philby's oldest friends, volunteers for the assignment. Elliott has defended Philby for years, argued for his innocence, stood by him through suspicion. Now he must confront the truth that his friend is a traitor. Elliott flies to Beirut on the 10th of January 1963. He calls Philby from the airport. They arrange to meet at Philby's apartment the next day. When Elliott arrives, he finds Philby relaxed, offering drinks, playing the gracious host. "I know why you're here," Philby says before Elliott can begin. "You want to know if I was a Soviet agent." Elliott nods, unable to speak. "Yes," Philby says. "I worked for Soviet intelligence. I betrayed operations. I warned Moscow about investigations. I have been a Soviet agent since 1934. The confession hangs in the air between them. Elliott feels physically ill. Almost 30 years of treason revealed in a single sentence. The last defection. Beirut, January to February of 1963. After his partial confession to Nicholas Elliott, Kim Philby agrees to provide a full written statement of his espionage activities. Elliott returns to London with this promise, believing Philby will cooperate now that his secret is finally exposed. Philby has no intention of cooperating. The confession was tactical, buying time. As soon as Elliot leaves, Philby contacts his Soviet handler through an emergency signal, a specific pattern of chalk marks on a wall near the Soviet embassy. Moscow responds immediately. Philby must be extracted before MI6 moves to arrest him. The plan is complex. Philby will take a Soviet freighter leaving Beirut harbor. The freighter is already in port, supposedly loading cargo. In reality, it is waiting for him. On the evening of the 23rd of January, 1963, Philby attends a dinner party at the home of journalist Glenn Balfour Paul. He drinks, laughs, discusses Middle Eastern politics. At 11 o'clock, he makes excuses and leaves. No one present realizes they will never see him again. Philby walks through Beirut's dark streets to the waterfront. A Soviet agent guides him to a small boat. They motor out to the freighter Dolmatova, anchored in the harbor. Philby climbs aboard. Minutes later, the ship raises anchor and sails into the Mediterranean night. The journey takes Philby through the Suez Canal, across the Black Sea, to the port of Odessa in the Soviet Union. He arrives on the 2nd of February, 1963. Soviet intelligence officers meet him with formal courtesy, but also suspicion. He is valuable, but also a potential security risk. They will never fully trust him. In London, MI6 discovers Philby's disappearance on the 25th of January. The response is fury, mixed with embarrassment. The most damaging spy in British history has escaped justice. Parliament demands answers. The press explodes with headlines about incompetence and betrayal. The third man revealed. Moscow, July of 1963. The Soviet government holds a press conference confirming that Kim Philby is in the Soviet Union and has been granted political asylum. They describe him as a committed anti-fascist who worked for peace. The announcement is designed to humiliate British intelligence. British newspapers run wild with speculation. Maclean and Burgess defected in 1951. Philby in 1963. Were there others? How many Soviet spies penetrated British intelligence? The phrase "the third man" becomes shorthand for Philby, the hidden conspirator who enabled the first two defectors to escape. In Parliament, Prime Minister Harold Macmillan faces intense questioning. How could the government employ a known Soviet agent? How many operations did Philby compromise? How many British agents died because of his betrayal? Macmillan's response is carefully evasive. The full extent of Philby's damage remains classified. But the Prime Minister admits, Mr. Philby was under suspicion for many years. The evidence was insufficient for prosecution. This is a matter of profound regret. What Macmillan does not reveal is that MI5's investigation has identified at least 2 more Cambridge spies. Anthony Blunt and John Cairncross are under intensive surveillance. The government faces a terrible choice: prosecute them publicly and cause another scandal, or gain their cooperation through immunity deals. The decision is made to approach Blunt first. He is the most vulnerable, still in Britain, still employed by the royal family, desperate to protect his reputation. In April of 1964, MI5 officer Arthur Martin confronts Blunt at the Courtauld Institute of Art, where Blunt now serves as director. Munity, London, April of 1964. Anthony Blunt sits in his elegant office at the Courtauld Institute, surrounded by art books and photographs of Renaissance paintings. Arthur Martin of MI5 sits across from him, holding a file folder. We know you were a Soviet agent during the war, Martin says without preamble. We have evidence from multiple defectors. We know about your work in MI5, your relationship with Burgess, your contact with Soviet intelligence. Blunt's face remains impassive, but his hands shake slightly. He says nothing. The Attorney General has authorized me to offer you immunity from prosecution, Martin continues. Full immunity, in exchange for a complete confession. Your cooperation will remain secret. Your position will be protected. But you must tell us everything. Blunt considers his options. Prosecution would mean prison, disgrace, the loss of everything he has built. But immunity means he can continue his life protected by official secrecy. The choice is obvious. Yes, Blunt says, I was recruited by the NKVD in 1937. I worked for Soviet intelligence until 1945. I will tell you everything. Over the following weeks, Blunt provides detailed confessions in 11 separate interviews. He describes his recruitment, his work in MI5, the documents he photographed, the agents he compromised. He names other spies in the network, including John Cairncross. The government keeps its promise. Blunt's confession remains secret. He continues as surveyor of the Queen's pictures. He remains a knight of the realm. Publicly, he is a respected art historian. Privately, he is a confessed Soviet spy, living under official protection. The Fifth Man. Rome, September of 1964. John Cairncross reads a British newspaper with growing dread. The article discusses ongoing investigations into Soviet espionage at Cambridge. His name has not been mentioned, but he knows that Blunt's confession has likely exposed him. Cairncross fled Britain in 1951, shortly after the Burgess and Maclean defection. He found work with the Food and Agriculture Organization in Rome, living quietly, avoiding contact with British intelligence. For 13 years he has hoped that he escaped suspicion. In October of 1964, 2 MI5 officers arrive in Rome. They contact Cairncross and request an interview. Cairncross agrees, knowing that refusal would only confirm guilt. The interrogation is conducted at the British Embassy. The MI5 officers are direct. We know about your work at Bletchley Park. We know about the documents you photographed. We know about your Soviet handlers. Anthony Blunt has confirmed your role in the network. Cairncross denies everything at first. Then, confronted with specific evidence, he admits to passing some information during the war. But he insists it was only to help an ally, that he stopped immediately after 1945, that he never betrayed truly vital secrets. The Kursk intelligence, one interrogator says, that came from you. Thousands of pages of Bletchley decrypts about German military planning. That was not helping an ally. That was espionage on a massive scale. Cairncross breaks. He provides a partial confession, admitting to wartime espionage but minimizing its scope. The British government offers him the same deal as Blunt, immunity in exchange for cooperation. Cairncross accepts. He will never return to Britain, but he will not face prosecution. The Moscow Years. Moscow, 1963 to 1988. Kim Philby lives in a KGB-provided apartment on Pushkinskaya Street. The Soviet Union awards him the Order of Lenin and makes him a full KGB colonel. But his life is not triumphant. It is isolated, monitored, and, ultimately, empty. Donald Maclean works as a policy analyst for Soviet foreign intelligence. His marriage to Melinda collapses. She eventually returns to the West with their children, unable to bear the restrictions of Soviet life. Maclean descends into alcoholism and depression. Guy Burgess fares worst. The KGB gives him a job teaching English to intelligence officers, but he is miserable. He drinks constantly, rages against his circumstances, begs to return to England. In August of 1963, at age 52, Burgess dies of liver failure. His body is cremated at Moscow's Donskoy Cemetery. "I thought I was helping build a better world," Burgess tells a Soviet acquaintance shortly before his death. "Instead, I destroyed my own life and helped create this prison." Philby writes his memoirs, published in 1968 as My Silent War. The book justifies his treason, portrays himself as a committed idealist. But letters to friends reveal his real feelings: loneliness, regret, growing disillusionment with Soviet communism. MacLean dies in Moscow in March of 1983, age 69, of heart disease. Philby dies in May of 1988, age 76, of heart failure. The Soviet Union gives both men state funerals, but few attend. They are forgotten symbols of a dying ideology. The Exposure. London, November of 1979. Margaret Thatcher stands in the House of Commons and reads a prepared statement that shatters Anthony Blunt's carefully maintained cover. The House will wish to know that the Security Service has information which establishes that, until his retirement in 1945, Professor Sir Anthony Blunt was a Soviet agent, the Prime Minister announces. The revelation creates a media firestorm. Blunt, still alive at age 72, is stripped of his knighthood. Buckingham Palace removes him as surveyor of the Queen's pictures. The press besieges his home. Reporters shout questions as he walks to buy groceries. Why did the government protect him for 15 years? How could a known Soviet spy continue serving the royal family? The scandal embarrasses the British establishment and reopens questions about the Cambridge Five. Blunt holds a press conference at the Times offices on the 20th of November, 1979. Surrounded by journalists, he reads a brief statement admitting his past espionage while refusing to discuss details. His voice is steady, but his hands shake. "I acted from political conviction, not personal malice," Blunt says. "I believed, at the time, that the Communist Party and Russia constituted the only firm bulwark against fascism. I was wrong." Blunt spends his final years in disgrace. Former friends shun him. Cambridge University removes his honorary fellowship. He dies in March of 1983, age 75, of a heart attack. His obituaries describe him as a brilliant art historian whose reputation was destroyed by treason. The Final Confession. France, 1990. John Cairncross, the last surviving member of the Cambridge Five, lives in quiet retirement in the south of France. He avoided public exposure, unlike Blunt, his immunity deal protecting him from prosecution and press attention. In 1990, British newspapers confirm that Cairncross was the fifth man. The revelation comes from newly released security files and statements from retired intelligence officers. Cairncross is 77 years old, living on a modest pension, far from the centers of power he once betrayed. Journalist Barry Penrose tracks down Cairncross for an interview. Cairncross agrees to speak, perhaps hoping to shape his own legacy. The interview is revealing and unrepentant. "I passed information to help defeat Hitler," Cairncross insists. "The Kursk intelligence may have shortened the war by months, saving countless lives. How is that betrayal?" When asked about continuing his espionage after the war ended, when Britain and the Soviet Union were no longer allies, Cairncross becomes defensive. "I stopped in 1945. Anything they say about later work is speculation." But declassified files later show Cairncross remained in contact with Soviet intelligence until at least 1952. He lied in the interview, just as he lied to his MI5 interrogators, just as he lied throughout his career. Cairncross dies in October of 1995 in Herefordshire, England, age 82. His death receives minimal press coverage. By then, the Cold War has ended, the Soviet Union has collapsed, and the Cambridge Five have become historical footnotes rather than urgent security threats. The Reckoning, London, 2025. Historians continue debating the full extent of damage caused by the Cambridge Five. Newly declassified documents appear sporadically, each revealing fresh betrayals. The complete truth may never be known. Official estimates: Philby compromised at least 40 MI6 operations between 1945 and 1963. At least 100 British and American agents were exposed by information he provided. Some were arrested, some executed, others simply disappeared in Soviet gulags. McLean's betrayal of atomic secrets accelerated Soviet nuclear weapons development by an estimated 2 to 4 years. Combined with intelligence from Klaus Fuchs and others, he helped the Soviet Union achieve nuclear parity with the West faster than Western planners believed possible. Cairncross's Bletchley intelligence gave the Soviet Union insight into British cryptographic capabilities and provided tactical intelligence that influenced major battles. Military historians argue about whether his information was decisive at Kursk, but all agree it was valuable to Soviet commanders. Blunt's work in MI5 compromised counterintelligence operations and protected the other spies from detection. His position gave him access to information about MI5's investigations into Soviet espionage, allowing him to warn his fellow spies when suspicion pointed their direction. Burgess's chaotic methods make it harder to assess his specific damage, but his social connections provided access to sensitive political information. His role in enabling McLean's escape prevented a potentially devastating investigation that might have exposed the entire network years earlier. The broader damage is incalculable. The loss of trust between Allied intelligence services, the questioning of British security procedures, the knowledge that some of the nation's most privileged citizens chose to betray it. The Cambridge Five undermined faith in institutions and demonstrated that loyalty cannot be assumed even among the elite. Why they did it. The question haunts every analysis of the Cambridge Five. Why did they do it? 5 privileged young men, educated at Britain's finest university, given opportunities most could never dream of, chose decades of betrayal. The answers are complex and individual. Kim Philby appears to have acted from genuine ideological conviction. Raised by an eccentric father who converted to Islam and championed Arab nationalism, Philby grew up questioning British imperial assumptions. The Depression, the rise of fascism, the Spanish Civil War, all convinced him that communism represented humanity's best hope. He betrayed his country believing he served a higher cause. Donald McLean's motivation combined ideology with psychological vulnerability. His father's death left him emotionally adrift at a crucial age. The Communist Party offered certainty, purpose, a father figure in Stalin. Later, as the reality of Soviet totalitarianism became undeniable, McLean suffered psychological breakdowns. But he was trapped by his choices, unable to turn back. Guy Burgess seems to have been motivated by rebellion and excitement as much as ideology. Openly homosexual in an era of persecution, he resented British society's moral hypocrisy. Espionage offered danger, subversion, revenge against a system that condemned his identity. The chaos of his personal life mirrored his approach to treason: reckless, flamboyant, ultimately self-destructive. Anthony Blunt acted from cold calculation mixed with class resentment. Despite his privileged position, he felt the British establishment looked down on him. His homosexuality, kept carefully hidden, made him vulnerable to blackmail but also resentful. He chose betrayal partly from ideology, partly from ambition, partly from a desire to prove himself superior to those who patronized him. John Cairncross was driven by class anger and intellectual arrogance. Son of a working-class Scottish family, he won his way to Cambridge through brilliance, but never felt accepted by the upper-class students who surrounded him. His espionage was revenge, proving he was smarter than all of them by betraying their secrets while they remained oblivious. What they destroyed. The Cambridge Five did not merely betray secrets, they destroyed lives. Every agent they compromised had a story, a family, a future that ended because of betrayal. In Albania, 1949 to 1952, MI6 and the CIA attempted to infiltrate anti-communist partisans to organize resistance against the communist government. Kim Philby, as chief of the MI6 section responsible for these operations, knew every detail. He warned Moscow. Albanian security forces captured the infiltrators one by one. Some were shot immediately. Others endured show trials before execution. "We sent them to certain death," a former MI6 officer testified years later. Philby sat in planning meetings, knew exactly where and when we would insert agents, and immediately told the Soviets. Those men never had a chance. In the Soviet Union itself, MI6 recruited several officials willing to provide intelligence. Philby learned their identities through his position. Every one of them was arrested. Some disappeared into the Gulag system. Others were executed after interrogation revealed how much they had told British intelligence. Konstantin Volkov, a Soviet intelligence officer in Istanbul, attempted to defect to Britain in September of 1945. He offered to identify Soviet spies inside British intelligence in exchange for asylum. Philby, responsible for handling the case, delayed until Soviet agents could kidnap Volkov. Volkov and his wife were drugged, placed on a Soviet aircraft, and flown back to Moscow. They were never seen again. These are the documented cases. How many others remain unknown? How many sources trusted British intelligence with their lives, only to be betrayed by the Cambridge Five? The exact number will never be established. The Soviet archives remain largely closed, but estimates range from dozens to hundreds of compromised agents. They also destroyed trust. After Philby's defection, American intelligence questioned every aspect of cooperation with British services. The CIA suspected more moles, withheld sensitive information, second-guessed British assessments. The special relationship between American and British intelligence, forged during World War II, suffered damage that took decades to repair. Lessons never learned. The Cambridge Five should have taught British intelligence crucial lessons about recruitment, vetting, and security. Some lessons were learned. Many were forgotten or ignored. After the scandal, MI5 and MI6 implemented stricter background checks. They began psychological profiling of potential recruits. They established better compartmentalization of information. They improved surveillance of suspected security risks. These changes prevented some future compromises. But the fundamental vulnerability remained. British intelligence continued recruiting primarily from the same narrow social class that produced the Cambridge Five. Oxbridge graduates, children of the establishment, men and eventually women, who knew the right people and attended the right schools. The informal recruitment networks that Arnold Deutsch exploited in the 1930s continued operating for decades. More devastating, British intelligence failed to learn the psychological lesson. The Cambridge Five succeeded, partly because their colleagues could not imagine that men of their class and education would betray their country. Even when evidence accumulated, investigators hesitated to pursue it because the suspects were one of us. This institutional blindness enabled other spy cases. Jeffrey Prime, a GCHQ translator, sold secrets to the Soviet Union from 1968 to 1977. George Blake, an MI6 officer, spied for the Soviets and compromised dozens of operations before his arrest in 1961. Michael Bettany attempted to sell MI5 secrets to the KGB in 1983. None of these later spies were from Cambridge. None were upper class. But all succeeded for the same reason the Cambridge Five succeeded. Their colleagues trusted them and failed to recognize warning signs until enormous damage was done. "We've learned to be suspicious of outsiders," a former counterintelligence officer reflected in a 2000 interview. "But we still struggle to believe that insiders, our colleagues, the people we trust, might betray us." That's the lesson we haven't learned. The Cambridge Five in memory. Cambridge University, present day. Students walk through Trinity College's Great Court, where Philby, Maclean, Burgess, and Blunt once studied. A blue plaque marks the building where Cairncross lived. The university does not celebrate its infamous alumni, but neither can it erase their connection to its history. The Cambridge Five have become cultural icons. Dozens of books analyze their motivations, their operations, their impact. Films and television dramas dramatize their betrayals. Novelists use them as templates for fictional spies. They represent a particular kind of betrayal. Educated, articulate, charming traitors who smile while stabbing their nation in the back. In Russia, attitudes toward them remain complex. During the Soviet era, they were celebrated as heroes who advanced the cause of communism. After the Soviet collapse, that narrative became uncomfortable. Modern Russian intelligence services acknowledge the Cambridge Five's historical importance, but avoid glorifying them. The KGB Museum in Moscow displays Philby's typewriter and some of his personal effects, but the exhibit is small and understated. In Britain, they symbolize a specific historical trauma. The realization that privilege and education guarantee neither loyalty nor wisdom. The establishment that educated, recruited, and promoted them failed to recognize their treason for decades. That failure undermined confidence in British institutions. Were there more than five? Probably. MI5 investigated dozens of other Cambridge graduates during the 1950s and 60s. Some investigations concluded with suspicion but insufficient evidence. Some files remain classified. Historians continue debating whether there was a sixth, seventh, or eighth spy in the Cambridge network. What is certain is that the five documented members caused catastrophic damage to Western intelligence operations. They betrayed hundreds of agents, compromised atomic secrets, influenced military outcomes, and shaped the Cold War's early years. Their actions led directly to deaths, imprisonment, and torture of people who trusted British intelligence. And they almost got away with it. The horror of the Cambridge Five is not supernatural. There are no ghosts, no demons, no monsters hiding in shadows. The horror is human, the cold calculation of betrayal, the rationalization of treason, the willingness to send other people to death while enjoying comfortable lives. These five men sat in London pubs, attended dinner parties, gave academic lectures, advised government ministers. They appeared normal, friendly, trustworthy. While maintaining these masks of respectability, They photographed classified documents, met Soviet handlers in parks, and transmitted intelligence that would lead to executions thousands of miles away. The true horror emerges from asking, how many others like them exist? How many people in positions of trust are secretly working against the institutions they serve? The Cambridge Five were eventually caught, but only after decades of successful espionage. How many were never caught? How many are operating now? The Cambridge Five died in disgrace or exile, but they achieved their goal. They aided the Soviet Union's rise to superpower status. They influenced the course of the Cold War. They proved that determined, intelligent traitors could operate undetected within the most secure institutions of Western democracy. Every fact in this history is documented. Every date is verified. Every name is real. This is not fiction. This happened. And the knowledge that it happened, that trusted officials betrayed their oaths for decades while their colleagues remained oblivious, should terrify us more than any ghost story ever could. The Cambridge spy ring was eventually broken, but how many others remain intact, hidden, waiting?